Welcome back to Dreaming Against the Machine. I'm your host, Adam Becker. This week's guest is Cory Doctorow, and I'm very excited to have him on the show. Cory is a science fiction author, a nonfiction author, an essayist, blogger, commentator on the tech industry for decades. I've been following his writings since I was in college, back when he was writing for the famous blog Boing Boing, and then read a few of his novels, and from there I was hooked. And over the last year, I have gotten the chance to meet him and be on a couple panels with him, and I knew that he would be a perfect person to have conversations with on this podcast about what a better future for the tech industry and for all of us might look like. So without any further chatter from me, here is Cory Doctorow. Cory, welcome to Dreaming Against the Machine.
Thanks, Adam. It's a pleasure to be on.
How do I even introduce you? You are a science fiction author and activist for electronic rights and essayist, nonfiction author, longtime blogger, and general internet person. Or at least that's how I think of you.
That suits me fine. Sure. Yeah. Why not? Raconteur, gentleman adventurer, possible war criminal. I don't know.
Yeah. Blogs from a hot air balloon.
Right.
In a goggles and cape, and has been associated with the Electronic Frontier Foundation for how long now?
I'm just about to start my 25th year.
Wow. Were you there when it started?
No, it's 35 years old.
Okay.
So I kind of grew up on it,
Mhm.
right? My mentor was a science fiction writer named Bruce Sterling.
Oh, yeah.
And Bruce wrote a book about the founding of EFF called The Hacker Crackdown. Basically the year EFF got started. And I read that book and spent the next 10 years following EFF's work and being really excited about it. And 10 years later, found myself working for them.
Yeah, no, Bruce Sterling, he co-wrote that book with William Gibson, The Difference Engine, didn't he?
Yeah, The Difference Engine. That's right. Bruce is my daughter's godfather.
Oh, wow. Okay.
He's a remarkable fella.
Yeah, well, I've been following your work for a very long time. I was reading Boing Boing back in college. And I knew when I started this podcast that you were one of the people I wanted to bring on, because if I'm trying to think about what a better future looks like, especially when I'm looking at the tech industry, you're one of the people who has been thinking about that in public longer and more carefully than anybody else I can think of. And you have a new book that is coming out the day this episode of the podcast drops, The Reverse Centaur's Guide to Life After AI. How to think about artificial intelligence before it's too late. Well, why don't we start with that? And I imagine the conversation will go many different places from there. So why don't we start with what a reverse centaur is?
It's a commonplace in automation theory and in the history of automation that when workers drive automation, they tend to use automated tools to improve the quality of their outputs. And when capital chooses the way that automation is used, it's almost always to improve the quantity or the throughput. And it's not because of like a callous disregard for workers, although there's some of that there. It's because as a just very material matter, if you acquire an asset and then you are depreciating it off your books and you want to maximize the return before it depreciates to zero, you want to use it as much as possible. And generally with machines, a human being is the bottleneck. You know, the machine can usually work longer and usually work faster than a person. But if the machine requires a person to do part of the job, then the machine is going to make demands on the person that will go all the way up to the entire capacity of that person, how hard they can work and how long they can work, and still demand more if it's available to be given. So in automation theory, a centaur is a person assisted by a machine, which is to say it's usually a worker deciding how they're going to use automation, right? So it's you on a bicycle, you with a spell checker, you with a debugger, right? And when I started writing computer programs, I didn't have a debugger. I just would like literally have to write breaks into my basic code on my Apple II Plus to figure out where my code was going wrong.
Yep.
So those are all ways in which a machine can be harnessed by a human, and in which we can be configured like a centaur, which is to say a human brain directing a tireless body that can do things that exceed both the endurance and the capacity of humans, right? That can work
Yep.
faster and harder than a human, but is directed by a human. And a reverse centaur is a human who is harnessed to a machine as a peripheral for it, right? And so, again, this is not new. Like, there's a reason that when we look at cinematic depictions of machines and humans in the class struggle, we get things like Charlie Chaplin in Modern Times, or Lucy and Ethel trying to get chocolates into the chocolate boxes at the end of the conveyor belt, and the conveyor belt keeps going faster and the chocolates are flying everywhere.
Yeah.
Because that's the foundational configuration, right? You're going to be worked as hard as the machine can work you, because you are there to do the part of the task the machine can't do. The machine isn't there to help you do something that you're good at. And so in these reverse centaur configurations where the machine is riding a frail human body, people aren't just used, they're used up. Right. So the most automated warehouses in America are Amazon's warehouses. And they're also the most injury-prone warehouses in America, where workers are injured at about 3 times the national rate. Those aren't coincidences. There's a causal relationship. You put 7 figures into warehouse automation, you want to work those machines as hard as you can, which means that the people have got to be worked at the edge of their endurance and capability, which means that eventually they're going to miss a stitch and they're going to get squashed by a machine.
How do we push back against this? And how, I mean, you're reminding me of something that a previous guest, Susanna Glickman, said about AI. She said, you hear people saying things like, oh, AI is making me, do my job faster. And like, no, that's not true. My boss is making me do my job faster.
Mm-hmm.
The AI is a tool and you could use it in different ways. So how do we push back against this larger trend of reverse centaurs, and how is AI playing into it?
I don't think AI is an extraordinary technology. I think AI is a normal technology, which is to say there's good ways of using it and bad ways of using it. And if your boss tells you to use it, they're probably making you miserable. And if you get to decide how to use it, you'll probably make yourself happy, though not always, because people sometimes make bad decisions. That's just every normal technology works like that.
Yeah.
But there is something extraordinary about AI, which is the size of the financial bubble that it's harnessed to.
Yeah.
And that is the most destructive thing about AI. It is the thing that is upstream from all the destructive stuff that happens with AI, which is like the suppression of wages, the immiseration of workers, the climate damage, the use of AI to automate harm to people, whether that's targeting in Gaza and a genocide, or Doge deciding who to fire, or the problems we have with like customer service being outsourced to AI. All of those are downstream of the fact that there's this massive financial bubble, and the size of the bubble can't be overstated.
Yeah.
Right. When I wrote the book, the global expenditure on AI was about $700 billion. A year later, it's 1.4 trillion, and it's on track to double again.
Yeah. And
that's a much bigger bubble than, South Seas. It's a bigger bubble than tulip bulbs, certainly a bigger bubble than like Web3 or crypto or metaverse. Mark Zuckerberg wasted $61 billion of his investors' money on metaverse. He's already spent $150 billion in 3 years on AI, and it's another $150 billion this year. And he says it's going to be more next year.
Yeah.
And so where does this extraordinary bubble come from, and how do we stop it? That's the question I think we need to ask, because bubbles are very bad, partly because of the harms we've just articulated, climate, labor, and so on, but partly because the nature of a bubble is to have insiders tell lies about an economic opportunity in order to steal money from ordinary investors. And in our world, the ordinary investor is a worker who no longer has a defined benefits pension and has a market pension, which is to say that if you don't want to starve to death when you're old, you need to find something to invest your money in. And these guys are tricking you into investing your money into something that they're just going to take, and you're the bag holder for them. So bubbles are really bad, and how do we get rid of them? Well, to understand that and to understand how to get rid of it, you have to understand the material and ideological basis of this bubble, which I'm happy to unpack. I know I've just said a lot of things, so I want to give you a chance to get a word in edgewise there if you'd like.
You and I were on a panel in LA, I guess that was maybe 2 months ago, and you said some of this stuff there, and that was...
Sure.
I think I asked you to be on this podcast right after that, because I thought, I knew I wanted you on here, but I wanted you to say a bunch of that stuff on here.
Look, so the material basis for all of the tech bubbles of this century is that firms that have saturated their markets need to find a way to convince investors that they can still grow.
Yeah.
And that is not because, per the old leftist saw, eternal growth is the ideology of a cancer cell. Wanting to continue to grow forever is in fact like a material thing that people want, not an ideological thing that people want, because firms that are growing have higher share prices relative to their earnings, what's called the price to earnings ratio.
Yeah.
And that's because a share in a company is a claim on its future earnings. And if your company is growing, its future earnings will be larger next year and larger the year after that. Whereas if your company is mature and has steady state, then its earnings are going to be the same year on year, or maybe, move around a little in a noisy way, but not see these big spikes or
Right.
continuous growth. So of course that share is worth less. And the reason that is materially important is, first of all, because the executives in the company who decide what the company is going to do are compensated in shares.
Yep.
Which means that if the share price experiences a sudden decline because the market has revalued the company as a mature firm instead of a growing firm, they stand to lose a giant amount of money personally.
Yep.
Right. So that in that case, what we're saying is that without growth, there's massive contraction. And also, the way that firms love to grow in this century where we don't enforce antitrust laws is by buying other companies. And the cool thing about having a growth stock is your shares become highly liquid, and you can buy other companies by giving them shares. And the great thing about shares is they're a substance that is endogenous to the firm and can be produced on the premises by typing zeros into spreadsheets.
Yeah.
Unlike money, which is exogenous and can only be acquired by convincing a creditor or a customer or an investor to give you some money. And if you try and make the money on the premises, the Treasury Department takes you away in handcuffs.
Yeah.
And so always better to be a company that has got a growth stock, because then you can grow by buying other companies with your growth stock, which makes your stock keep growing.
Yeah.
So it's a self-licking ice cream cone. And so firms really, really want to have a growth story. And through this century, the growth stories started as fairly reasonable, but low probability. So Facebook was about to become Google by doing the pivot to video and taking YouTube over. Google was about to become Facebook by doing Google Plus. Those are reasonable propositions. Like, Facebook is a business, we know, because they have a balance sheet.
Mm-hmm.
Whether Facebook will surrender that business to Google is like low probability, but at least it's reasonable.
Right.
At a certain point, they got tired of having arguments about whether Facebook would become Google or Google become Facebook. And they're like, no, we're going to become a thing that doesn't exist. And of course, that's less reasonable, but at least no one can credibly argue any more credibly than you can argue that that's a small opportunity versus a large opportunity, because you've just made it up. How big is the metaverse? $1 quintillion, because I made it up. How do you know the metaverse isn't worth $1 quintillion? I'm the world's leading expert on the metaverse. I made it up, right? I made up DAOs, I made up Web3, I made up cryptocurrency, and the market opportunity is infinity. And these guys don't need it to work, although I think they'd like it to work. All they need is for there to be another one of these when the market loses confidence in this one. They need to be able to sort of run across the river on the backs of alligators without losing a leg. And then we come to the AI bubble. And the AI bubble is like those other bubbles in that it's a growth story about firms that have no room to grow. But it's also much, much bigger. And so this raises the question, like, what is materially and ideologically different about AI? Materially, it's different because it is realer than those other bubbles. AI is, from a computer science perspective, interesting, right? Breakthroughs are always cool.
Yep.
And computer science gets those all the time, right? They come up with they apply a technique in a new way and something new happens. And that's what happened with AI 10 years ago. What is different about the AI breakthrough relative to most of the CS breakthroughs that we experience is that it's scaled. So usually you have a thing and you do it slightly differently and you get a bigger output than you expected. And you're like, that's great, but you do it harder and the output doesn't increase linearly with it. Whereas with AI, for quite some time, until pretty recently, if you just did more of the same, you got a commensurately larger output from AI, which is like, when you see that, you do everything you can with it. You want to find out, just like, it's like finding some low-hanging fruit and then finding a bunch of other low-hanging fruit next to it.
Right.
You're just going to keep picking that fruit until you run out of low-hanging fruit. So there's a lot of low-hanging fruit with AI, right? That conceptually is very interesting, but I don't think that accounts for it, because we still have these firms that are now at a $1.4 trillion capital commitment and that are grossing globally $50 billion a year.
Yeah.
And I know 50 billion sounds like a lot of money, but you're an astrophysicist. 1.4 trillion is a big fucking number.
Yes.
In a way that makes billions look like small numbers.
Yeah.
And so why this exuberance? And I think the exuberance is grounded in the ideological proposition that on the one hand, these major capital allocators, billionaires, Gulf states, and so on, are gripped by the fantasy of a world without people because they are gripped by the terror of what other people mean to them in the world.
Yeah.
Right? If you are like a boss, you think you're driving, right? You think you're in the driver's seat, but you know if you don't show up for work, everything happens just fine. Whereas if the workers don't show up, the factory shuts down. And so you suspect you might be in the backseat with a Fisher-Price steering wheel. And what AI dangles is the possibility of wiring that toy steering wheel into the drivetrain of the car. So you have an amazing idea and you prompt the AI and it shits it out. And you don't have to have these like ego-shattering confrontations with screenwriters who tell you that your screenplay is stupid, with programmers who tell you your idea won't scale or can't be secured or will run into problems once it interfaces with the rest of the technological world or that isn't in compliance. You're a hospital administrator who finds a way to cut costs and you don't have to contend with doctors who have medical degrees who tell you you're going to kill people. This is the amazing thing about AI. And so on the one hand, these guys quite like this, right? If you're a billionaire, you already live in a fairly solipsistic world where like all the actual flesh and blood people you come into contact with just glaze you from the moment they come into your company until they part ways with you. And on the other hand, like how could you hurt as many people as you have to hurt to make $1 billion unless you don't really think other people's pain is real and other people aren't real? And, you do what Elon Musk does, which is call them NPCs.
Yep.
And so there's a certain degree of solipsism already there. It's like, I think it's not a coincidence that ketamine is kind of the drug du jour. I have chronic pain and, I got a ketamine infusion once and like the overwhelming feeling of being in the K-hole is that the whole world is something you imagined. And that the whole world is just taking place in your imagination. It is the most solipsistic of all the drugs, right? And then I think these people are also making a bet that even if AI can't do away with the people, that AI salesmen who can promise bosses that this is a people-removing technology will be pushing on an open door because bosses want this too.
Yeah.
And so you don't even have to believe that it can get rid of the people. You just have to believe that it can convince bosses that it can get rid of the people.
Right.
And that you can get out before they figure out that it can't. You don't have to run faster than the bear. You just have to run faster than the other investors.
Right.
And you make out okay.
Yeah. No, this is related to like a question that I get a lot when I run around and give talks and people ask, is AI going to take my job? And I said, well, the good news is AI is not going to be able to do your job as well as you do it, or really even close for almost any job. The bad news is in order for you to lose your job, it doesn't have to. Someone just has to be able to convince your boss that it can.
Yeah, I always say the fact that an AI can't do your job doesn't mean that an AI salesman can't convince your boss to fire you and replace you with an AI that can't do your job.
Exactly.
And so that's the reason that I think the AI bubble is dangerous. And I think that is its material basis. And so if we're going to get rid of the AI bubble, which is bad because people are losing their jobs. And so that's bad for those people. It's also bad for anyone who depends on the work those people do. And if we want to get rid of the bubble because it's bad, because it has environmental consequences, because it is ultimately designed to impoverish scared old people who put their retirement savings into what amounts to a stock swindle, right? Then we need to attack its material basis. We need to attack the story that they tell to investors that gets the capital in the door. Because if we drain off their capital, then the bubble goes away. Then all of these other things stop happening, and it will be horrible and traumatic when it happens. But the only thing worse than a $1.4 trillion bubble bursting is a $2.8 trillion bubble bursting.
Yeah.
And that's the bubble that we're headed towards. And so we have to get rid of this before it gets worse.
So how do we puncture that story? I mean, that's some of what I have been trying to do, with my work, because I think part of the story here is a story about the existing AI being something that it's not, being more like AI from science fiction, like Commander Data from Star Trek or something, rather than, the kind of compressed version of the internet spitting out a kind of autocomplete on steroids that is what we actually have.
I think that one of the ways to do this is to resolve the seeming paradoxes of AI, because the paradoxes are used to confuse people. So there's like one paradox of AI is that you have programmers who use AI who are skilled programmers and who have historically been reliable narrators of their own experience, who say that using AI is very good.
Yeah.
And you have other programmers who are skilled programmers and reliable narrators who say it's very bad.
Yep.
And when you actually examine the circumstances under which they're working, what you usually find is a centaur and a reverse centaur.
Mm.
So by putting it in that framework, then you get to something that resolves this paradox. And then what falls out of that is, well, if the thing that AI is good for is making skilled workers work better, but without necessarily a reduction in cost, right? But instead an improvement in quality. Well, that's nice for us, but it's not going to produce the return on the investment you want.
Yeah.
You know, I'm undergoing treatment for cancer.
I'm sorry.
Seems very treatable. That's okay.
Good.
But I spent a lot of time talking to radiologists.
Yeah.
And so I am really very attuned to stories about AI and its ability to help radiologists.
Right.
And you know, I was at the Kaiser Center this morning on Sunset at the nuclear medicine clinic getting a PET scan, which is now on a radiologist's desk. If I thought that there was someone working for Sam Altman down at the hospital administrator's office saying to him, look, right now you've got $1 million worth of radiologists on the payroll. It's 10 of them, and they each do 100 x-rays a day. And here's what I propose. You give me $500,000 a year, and it's going to review the work of those radiologists. And about twice a day, it's going to say, have another look. And sometimes it'll be right. And you're going to save some lives. And your cost for radiology are going to go up by 50%. Your throughput is going to go down by 2%. But you're going to save people's lives. I'd be actually okay with that.
Yeah.
Right? But the sales call that is going on at hospital administrators all around America is, why don't you fire 90% of your radiologists?
Yeah.
Have the chatbot do radiology at a rate that's too cheap to meter. Split the difference in the wage savings with me, the AI salesman, and my boss.
Yeah.
And make the radiologists sign the diagnoses and blame them when people die.
Yeah.
Now, I've had radiologists write to me and say, well, that's not how it's cashing out, because we have some labor power. And so far, mostly we get to use the radiology software the way we like it, which is great. It's just how reverse centaurs work.
Yeah.
But that's not how you make back the cost of developing the radiology bot, right?
Yeah.
You don't make back the cost of developing the radiology bot by giving more power to workers and having them do fewer outputs for more money. Right? That's like that. That might be how a public healthcare system that was well funded would use this technology. It's certainly not how the private sector is going to use it. And it's absolutely not how austerity crazed, NHS or OHIP in Ontario are going to make use of it. They're only looking for cost savings.
You're reminding me sort of obliquely of something that Douglas Rushkoff said a few years ago before the current AI boom kicked off. This story that he told of being brought to a room full of a few, very wealthy tech moguls who asked him, how do we deal with societal collapse? How do we use our money to insulate ourselves from societal collapse and guarantee the loyalty of security forces after the end of civilization?
What kind of bomb collar do I need to put on my mercenaries so they don't kill me and take my food after I move into the bunker?
Exactly, yeah. And he said, the best use of your money is to try to prevent the collapse of civilization. And they just dismiss this as hopelessly idealistic because it was, less interesting and would involve a hard look at their own actions. But I keep thinking about that in conversations like this, because I keep thinking that these guys, these tech billionaires and, the heads of the AI companies, the investors and whatnot, see the ultimate promise of AI as a way of solving that problem. Like, oh, what if we could have the bunkers and we just have a completely automated defense force, and so we don't need to buy the loyalty of our security
Sure,
forces.
it's the world without people.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is very solipsistic, and solipsism. I don't want to pretend that solipsism is a vice confined to the rich, right?
Sure.
I mean, hell really is other people. Jean-Paul Sartre was not wrong, right? But the reason hell is other people is because other people are quite nice, and yet they stubbornly refuse to acknowledge that you're right and they're wrong. And so when you want to do something that requires someone else, you have to either apply suasion or coercion to get them to do it. And that is very tedious.
Yeah.
And so, I think the boom of AI boyfriends and AI girlfriends is the same impulse in different guys. It has different consequences.
Right.
We're not firing all the girlfriends. So, although I have to say that I think the fact that it's mostly AI boyfriends says something about who is harder to live with.
Yes.
I think
yes,
it's
absolutely.
empirically harder to be the partner of a man than the partner of a woman.
Yeah, no, I think that is true, but that's
equal.
A separate conversation.
So that is a problem, right? And, you see it up and down the stack, right? You see it with Mark Zuckerberg saying, well, you have friends, which is great, because they're a pain in the ass, which means that you can't all agree when to leave Facebook. So long as I'm sure that you hate me less than you love them, I can torment you in lots of ways with ads and slop and manipulation and surveillance, and you'll stay because you guys can't all agree on where to go because you can't even agree on what board game you're playing this weekend. Right. So you're just going to be stuck there. But then he's like, the problem with your friends is they don't want to optimize your friendship to maximize engagement. They keep insisting that the point of a friendship is to be friends with people. Clearly, this is wrong.
Right.
And so I'm going to try replacing them with theater kids. And if I dangle remarkably small sums of money in front of theater kids, they will spend every hour that God sends trying to figure out how to maximize your engagement with the platform. The problem is that an algorithmic feed of theater kids doing skits is fully fungible with any other algorithmic feed of theater kids doing skits. And so you can go to TikTok or whatever. And if it becomes non-fungible, right? If it actually which theater kid you're watching matters, well, then that theater kid can start demanding things from Mark Zuckerberg.
Right.
So he's got a new plan. He's going to replace the theater kids with chatbots. Yeah. Right. And so we get rid of the theater kids, we replace them with chatbots, and we get social media without socializing, which is romance without romantic partners, which is a workplace without workers, which is screenplays without screenwriters, which is movies without actors, right? You see this all the way through. And back to your book, I think that this is in a lineage with long-termism.
Yeah.
That says, don't care about real people. Put all of your energy into making as much money as possible at the expense of living people, and tell yourself that it's morally defensible because you are going to create an almost immeasurably small improvement in the quality of life of 10 to the 53 artificial humans that we will compute on the bones of Venus, which we will convert to computronium 10,000 years hence.
Yeah.
Right? Which is the most solipsistic, goddamn ketamine-coated nonsense I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Right? That is a fantasy straight out of the K-hole.
No, I can't disagree. I'm thinking about the angry emails I'm going to get from ketamine users who listen to this podcast, though that Venn diagram might be zero.
Ketamine's super fun. I have experienced not just what you get if you do a bump of ketamine that you buy from some guy and then hopefully test with a fentanyl strip. I have lain on a couch and had an anesthetist and a cardiologist standing by while they administered a lot of ketamine to me. It was very interesting and cool, but also the quality of this delusion is the ketamine delusion. And in the same way that cocaine feels very 80s coded and the 80s feel very cocaine coded, I think 2020s are very ketamine coded, and ketamine is very 2020 coded. Cocaine had been around since I think the 20s, and so is cat, right, since the 30s.
Yeah.
But it didn't find its social milieu until this moment.
Well, now you're making me want to bring on an expert on ketamine. Maybe that'll be a guest for a future episode.
I thought you were going to say, now I'm making you want to do some coke.
No. No, of all of the drugs out there, cocaine might be the least interesting to me because I have enough trouble with caffeine. Like, I don't like caffeine. It makes me sort of jittery and nervous. And so the idea of
Right.
something that would stimulate me further, absolutely not.
Well, more caffeine for me then.
Yes, that's what everyone tells me. Unfortunately, we still live in capitalism, and that means we need to talk about our partners and sponsors. But fortunately, our partners and sponsors are great. And if you want to support Dreaming Against the Machine directly, you can join us on Patreon, where $5 a month gives you the chance to ask questions of upcoming guests and a dedicated stream of cat pictures. We love our patrons, and we also love being a part of the Multitude Collective at multitudeshows.com. Multitude is a podcast company made up of passionate people creating shows you can count on. Shows like Tiny Matters. Science shapes every facet of our lives, but so much of its influence is overlooked or buried in the past. Tiny Matters is an award-winning science podcast about tiny things, from molecules to microbes, that have a big and often surprising impact on society, past and present. From deadly diseases to forensic toxicology to the search for extraterrestrial life, hosts and former scientists Sam Jones and Deboki Chakravarti embrace the awe and messiness of science and its significance, asking questions like, why is wildlife thriving at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant? Will humans ever live on Mars? And why is smallpox the only human infectious disease we've eradicated? Tiny Matters is created by the American Chemical Society, a nonprofit scientific organization based in Washington, D.C., and is produced by Multitude. New episodes every Wednesday, wherever you listen to podcasts. And here's a word from our sponsors. One of this week's sponsors is Shaker and Spoon, a monthly cocktail and mocktail subscription. Full disclosure, they sent me a free box this month, and I'm excited to try it on a night off soon. Each box includes 3 original recipes from award-winning bartenders, with enough ingredients to make 4 of each of those drinks for at least 12 drinks in total. And each box includes everything you need to make the drink except for the alcohol, and they're built around 1 spirit per box, so you really just need 1 bottle of something that you probably already have on hand if you drink. And if you don't drink, every box includes 0 proof options for every recipe, and some of the drinks are designed to be completely spirit-free from the start. The boxes come with recipe cards that include guidance on mixing techniques and glossary of terms that teach you how to shake, stir, build, and garnish these unusual cocktails with eclectic ingredients. And they also include everything else that you need to try out these drinks, like custom syrups, bitters, extracts, garnishes, and aromatics. And so you can try the drinks without going off and buying full bottles of niche ingredients that you'll never use again. It's a great idea for date nights or hosting a party or bringing a gift to someone else's party. And you can always skip or swap boxes or even just buy individual kits or ingredients without subscribing. So you can try this stuff out at their website, shakerandspoon.com. Use code DATM for 10% off your purchase. So how do we fight this bubble? Like, yes, we go after the story, but what else can we do? I mean, like you and I, we go after this story. We do that in our work. What can listeners of this podcast do to try to fight this bubble?
Well, it really depends because it has these different facets,
Yeah.
right? So, like, in some ways, it's just the normal stuff. Like, what do you do about the fact that local councils are being bribed to use eminent domain and to ignore environmental review rules and to ignore consultation rules about water and energy usage to build data centers? I mean, you restore those things. Now, how do you do that? Well, you get involved in local politics. You become part of a polity. Local politics, easier to get involved with than you think. I'm not saying you have to elect a senator here.
Yeah.
Right? Like, have you ever looked at a Moms for Liberty? Like, have you ever heard one of them speak? They're not sending their best. They're not sending their brightest. And yet they were able to take over a lot of poorly regarded local offices.
Yes.
And do a lot of damage. So
Yeah.
just, you got to get involved in your local politics to really make that work. Now, as to the other questions, like what do creative workers do? We've, for 40 years now, been expanding copyright. We made it last longer. We made it cover more kinds of works. We made it cover more uses of those works.
Yeah.
We created a much more punitive statutory damages regime and a much more simple basis for achieving those statutory damages, or extracting them. We did manage to make the media industry much larger and more profitable in that time, but we did not make artists richer. In fact, artists are poorer, both as a share of the money and in real terms, than they were when we started. And that's because they're bargaining into a market with like 5 publishers and 4 studios and 3 labels and 2 companies that do the apps and 1 ebook audiobook company. And giving us more to bargain with is giving us more to bargain away. And so like that, it's like giving your bullied kid extra lunch money. There's just like not an amount of lunch money you give them that gets them fed. And so instead of that, we can look to the actual successes that creative workers have had in resisting AI. And the most significant success that any group of creative workers has had is the screenwriters.
Mm.
And the screenwriters, now they're a militant union. They'd had a really important strike against the talent agencies that were rolled up by private equity that helped them, build institutional capacity. But what they also have going for them is they and the other Hollywood guilds are the only workers in America allowed to do something called sectoral bargaining. So sectoral bargaining is when a group of workers are allowed to bargain with all the employers in a sector. Like if we had sectoral bargaining for fast food, everyone who worked at a fast food restaurant would have a contract with every fast food owner, franchisee in the country. Lots of sectors are organized this way outside of America. But in America, sectoral bargaining was outlawed in 1947 with the Taft-Hartley Act. And the Hollywood unions were carved out, right? So the reason like illustrators can't do what the Hollywood writers did is because they don't have sectoral bargaining with everyone who hires commercial illustrators.
I'm really angry right now as a freelance journalist.
Uh-huh.
I want sectoral bargaining with, like where I can make common cause with my fellow freelancers and staff writers.
100%. And here's the kicker. If you're out there fighting for more copyright, you're on the same side as your boss, and no other work in America gives a shit.
Yeah.
And if you're out there for sectoral bargaining, your boss is furious with you, and every other worker in America wants the same thing as you.
Yeah.
Right? So if we're going to like conjure up a new law, and we haven't gone into this, but like as someone who's worked on copyright for 25 years, just anyone who tells you that it's obvious that training a model is an infringement of copyright is just shitting you. That's not to say that we couldn't make a new copyright law that makes training a model unambiguously unlawful. But, all these settlements, like the settlement from Anthropic, there was just a green light to go forward against Facebook for downloading a bunch of porn. These are all for pirating ebooks and movies. They're not for training on them, right? Like counting the elements in a pirate ebook is not illegal for the same reason that if you go to the flea market and count the number of beats per minute on a pirate CD you buy there, that publishing the count is not illegal, even if buying the pirated CD is. And we do not want to make identifying and publishing facts about copyrighted works an activity that requires a license.
Yeah.
Major proprietors of copyright are chuds like the Ellisons, right? Do we really want facts about their copyrighted works to be something that you can only learn and publish if you have their permission? This is nuts.
Yeah.
And so, okay, maybe you think, oh, all right, well, I think I could wordsmith a copyright law that would let us identify facts about the Ellison's copyright output, but not let training happen. Then you still have to fall back on the fact that your boss at the media company really would like to fire you and replace you with a model. And whenever these lawsuits drop, the companies that are suing, they publish press releases saying, we're bitterly disappointed that they didn't license this catalog from us. Right? They don't say we're bitterly disappointed that you're trying to like replace workers with AI.
Yep.
They're like, no, we just want to be in charge.
Yeah, no, this is, well, okay, now you're reminding me of something that you said back on that panel that I was talking about, that, that you've made some sort of mistake if you were fighting on the same side as the bosses instead of the other workers.
Well, at the very least, if you're going to do some Bayesian reasoning here, right? And you're going to go like, I don't really understand the ins and outs of these issues. I'm not a computer scientist. I'm not a copyright lawyer. I'm not a labor lawyer. But like broadly, when I'm on the same side as my boss and on the opposite side of all the other workers, and the other position puts me on the same side as all the other workers, but the opposite side of my boss, I am probably going down the wrong path here.
Yeah.
And then, I can explain to you as someone who knows a little about machine learning and a lot about copyright law, why that is. But even if you knew nothing about it, it's just, like if I'm going to eat from this buffet and everyone who eats from it ends up spending the night puking and shitting their guts out, and this buffet is full of people talking about what a great meal they've had, and you don't know anything about microbiology, you can still make a good judgment about which buffet to eat at.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. Okay, so in addition to being an incredible nonfiction author and essayist, blogger, and whatnot, as I said at the beginning, you also write science fiction.
I do.
And I think that, I mean, you know this from reading my book. I think that a lot of these problems that exist with the tech billionaires' ideas about what the future could look like, or the ideas that they're trying to sell us on, these guys are not particularly original. Their ideas came from science fiction, or at least bad readings of science fiction.
Sure.
And so I have to ask you, what do you think is going on there? And how do you feel about it as a science fiction author?
So I think there is always been a strain of science fiction fan and science fiction writer who thought that they were seeing farther, and they were predicting the future. And I think the more clear-eyed ones have always said, no, these are parables that use the future to analyze the present.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's unusual. I think a lot of us get high on our own supply.
Yeah.
Someone told me this wasn't true, so fact check me if I'm wrong here in the comments. But there's a writer called E.L. Doctorow who's not related to me, who is dead now. And he wrote a book called, a collection of essays called The Creationists. And the title essay is about the origin of the Genesis myth, which the Hebrews stole from the Babylonians. And the Babylonians, according to Doctorow, no relation, the reason they thought it was true, right, in the beginning, blah, 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 was that they just couldn't believe that an idea that cool originated in their imagination, so they assumed it must be a revelation, right? They were just like, anything this cool must be divine, right? That is, I think, a common place to go to. I think, like, there is just a fine line between being very excited about an idea you've had and assuming that if it's exciting, it must be true or doable. And one of the wonders of being a science fiction writer is that you can get excited about an idea and turn it into a cracking narrative without having to try and make it happen, which, is the place where a lot of these things founder, where you have an idea and you start doing it, and eventually you get trapped in the last 10% that takes 99% of the work, and it just turns out that there's a reason that this thing that seems obvious to you never happened. And it doesn't mean it won't ever happen, but it does mean that, like, it's not necessarily within our grasp. And one of the things about science fiction is that it is a genre that is very closely connected to fantasy.
Yeah.
And not just because the same readers and writers congregate around and the same publishers and editors published it, but also because something about the trappings of science fiction, where you create the illusion of internal consistency and where you have enough things that feel true that the reader will go along with you with thought experiments of things that can't ever be true, that allows you to sort of compose an internally consistent magic system and have it feel real, but also allows you to have a rocket ship that has a bunch of things that feel like they're scientifically plausible, and then you announce that it travels faster than the speed of light, and the reader goes along with you.
Yeah.
But obviously that's fantasy.
Yeah.
Right? As is the time machine, as is everything else. And there was a movement within science fiction called the mundane movement to write science fiction that didn't violate any known laws of physics. It was an interesting constraint, and some writers did some good work with it, Jeff Ryman particularly. But it never caught on for a really good reason, right? Because the fantasy element's really important in science fiction. It's where your MacGuffins come from. It's how you're able to do those thought experiments, And at its best, one of the moves that science fiction makes is it reifies some aspect of our technology into something of global scale and significance, in order to magnify its capabilities and its limitations and its consequences. And it's a bit like when you go to the doctor and the doctor swabs the back of your throat, and then she rubs it on a petri dish and puts it in a medium over the weekend, and then comes back on Monday and looks at it under a microscope. And the thing that makes that diagnostically useful is not that it's an accurate representation of your body, it's that it is a usefully inaccurate representation of your body. We've reified one fact about your body, the gunk at the back of your throat. And we are leaving aside everything else in order to find something out about you. But no one would mistake the gunk for an accurate representation of your body.
Right.
It is because it's inaccurate that it's useful diagnostically. And there's a lot of good science fiction that does this.
Yeah.
but it leads people who misread it or who have a naive reading of it or who are naive in their writing of it, who fall prey to the Babylonian delusion that anything this cool must be true. It misleads people into thinking that this simplified model can be actually applied, used to predict the future. Harry Seldon is real, all of those things.
Harry Seldon is interesting. Harry Seldon, I guess, okay, for listeners who don't know, Harry Seldon is sort of the central figure of the foundation novels by Isaac Asimov, which are really important in the history of science fiction. And he was, in those novels, the founder of a discipline called psychohistory, which allows you to predict the future scientifically. And
to thousands of years
yeah,
into the deep future.
Yes, exactly.
It's why Paul Krugman became an economist very famously. He says, I became an economist because I wanted to be Harry Seldon.
Yeah, no, and I mean, and he has actually, if you go back and look at Krugman's early career, he has a paper about the economics of interstellar trade, taking special relativity into account, which is a fun paper if you're the right kind of nerd for it, which he is, and apparently I am too. But not that he thinks that interstellar trade is going to happen. It was just a fun thought experiment.
He's just carrying the thought experiment out to see what it would be like.
Exactly. Yeah. Because, like, okay, how do you deal with the economics of trade when clocks don't run at the same speed on ships and whatnot because they're going near the speed of light, stuff like that. But yeah,
Carl Schrader did an amazing book based on this. I'm trying to remember what it was called, but it's based on the idea of suspended animation, and you have planets based on how much resource a planet has, which is to say how long it takes the robots to accumulate enough to keep you alive. You slow yourself down. So if you're on a planet where to get a day's worth of resources it takes 100 years, you sleep for 100 years and then you wake up for a day, and then you sleep for 100 years and you wake up for a day. And there are other civilizations where it's a week, and other civilizations where it's a month, and other civilizations where it's a day. He has all of these in a set of interstellar things.
Huh.
It's amazing.
I've never heard of these books.
Hang on, I'm going to look it up.
Okay. Well, while you're looking it up, one of the striking things to me about those foundation books, they go after a kind of technological determinism, right? Harry Seldon's...
It's called Lockstep.
Okay, good.
Sorry.
Yeah, Harry Seldon's sort of vision of the future is that, technology is the one thing that really matters. And so, and science, technology and science, and everything else is just, messy details that don't ultimately matter for the grand scope of human history. And so this is like the idea behind these novels is he's doing Asimov was doing the decline and fall of the Roman Empire in space, and so Seldon's idea was to take this science of psychohistory and use it to take this interstellar dark age that was supposed to happen between the first and second galactic empires and shorten it by a factor of 15 or 20, something like that.
That's the point, is it's not purely deterministic, because what he discovers is that there's a way to intervene in it. You can't head it off, but you can change the way that it pulls out. So, I mean, there's a sense in which that's a very humanistic message that kind of jives with, say, the work of Ada Palmer, who really has done amazing work to talk about how there's a certain amount that comes to you through the great forces of history, and that produces an envelope within which human agency can change outcomes. And the great forces of history are really just a word for the human agency of a previous era in history that set in motion certain forces. But yeah, it's not quite fatalistic. Right. He's not like Kurt Vonnegut eventually gets into this place where he's just like, the first billiard ball in the universe knocked the second billiard ball, and then everything has been determined since then, and nothing matters. We're all just like a cosmic Newtonian dance. And even the fact that you're offended by that was set in motion by the billiard balls, Mark Twain too. Mark Twain thought this.
Well, the funny thing to me, though, is Selden's utopia is sort of a utopia of scientists and engineers, and so it's sort of easy to see where a tech billionaire might look at it and say, "Oh yeah, I want to be Harry Seldon."
Yep.
On the other hand, when you say, "Oh well, this is a set of sci-fi novels that's centered around a person who founded a scientific approach to history," the scientific approach to history, that's a phrase that was already around. And
it
that's
sure
a
was.
line that belongs to someone
Guy
else.
with a big beard.
Yeah,
A guy with a big
exactly.
beard came up with that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that what's interesting about those Asimov novels psychoanalytically
Yeah.
in respect to the people we see today is it supposes that the social sciences can be turned into a kind of physics.
Yeah,
And that
exactly.
qualitative questions can be eliminated from the social sciences.
Yep.
That you can quantize qualitative aspects of humanity with no loss of fidelity and then stick them in models and perform mathematical operations on them and create high fidelity predictions of what's going to happen.
Yep.
And of course, that's just not true. I mean,
No.
like, and Asimov was writing in the age of Claude Shannon, who's saying
Yep.
things like, you're going to lose information when you perform that quantizing step. And yet, this is where the hand waving is,
Yeah.
right? And hand waving is an art among science fiction writers. Heinlein, but lots of other writers have written AI stories that you can see the hand waving turning into an investor story today. Because the hand waving is, we took computers and we did computer with them, but we added more computers and we did more computer with them. And then one day they woke up.
Right.
Right? That's just Sam Altman, right? Sam Altman is doing the first chapter of The Moon is a Harsh Mistress.
Right.
But he's raising hundreds of billions of dollars off of it.
God. And then Elon Musk wants to go to the moon and throw rocks at us.
Yeah. Also, the moon is a harsh mistress.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah. A little Heinlein is a dangerous thing.
Oh,
a lot of Heinlein's an even more dangerous
I was
thing.
about to say, Heinlein's not...
Let us all thank ourselves that they're confining themselves to early Heinlein and not the stories he wrote when he had the benign tumor that was restricting the flow of blood to his brain, and he told his editor to fuck off and started writing 900-page novels about traveling back in time and having sex with his mother.
I think Charlie Strauss would be the person to bring on to talk about that.
He's definitely the guy to talk to about that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, God. Anyway. Well, we've gone pretty far afield, but I mean, it is interesting to me, though, that again, it's not an original idea, right? The idea that you can take the social sciences and sand off the things that make them complicated and difficult and turn them into physics. I mean, speaking as a physicist and also as someone reasonably conversant in the history of science, no, you can't do that, but that's not an original idea, right? People have wanted and tried to do that for many, many years, and they have failed because it doesn't work, right?
Look.
Yeah.
The Nobel Prize in Economics was created because economists were tired of being not taken seriously as a quantitative science, and so they found a guy called Nobel to give them a prize. It is now folded into the wider Nobel infrastructure, but it's not a Nobel Prize.
Yeah.
It's not a Nobel Prize in economics.
Yeah, no, it's the Nobel Memorial Prize.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the like butthurt consolation prize for people who want to be taken seriously as physicists when really what they're doing is social science.
Yeah. No, I mean, the thing that's crazy about that to me as a physicist is like the reason why physics admits like closed form mathematical solutions to some, not all, of the problems of interest in the field is precisely because physics is going after just about the simplest questions that you can ask about the natural world,
Sure.
right? If you start asking questions about systems that are more complicated than a few particles or a highly idealized system of non-living things or the universe itself at scale so large that you can just forget about anything that is smaller than a galaxy cluster and any forces other than gravity, like unless you're dealing in one of those domains, the world is just too complicated to admit of those sorts of solutions.
Well, unless you're one of those farmers who breeds perfectly spherical cows of uniform density on your frictionless surface.
Exactly, and they emit milk isotropically in all directions. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, but that's exactly the thing, right? I mean, the social sciences have to be complex in other ways, in ways that physics is less complicated, because otherwise they're not going to be able to study social phenomena. But that makes them messy and brings us back to the fact that hell is other people.
Hell is other people.
You know, the funny thing is, you're right when you said earlier that, like, the annoying thing about other people is that they don't understand that you're right and they're wrong. But I think that the tech billionaires, I think that they see it in an even more sort of nakedly sociopathic way, and that the thing that's awful about other people is that they need things.
Sure.
Yeah.
But that's a way in which they're wrong.
Right.
Exactly.
Like
what, Jeff Bezos has very strong ideas about whether you need to pee. And the answer is you don't.
Right.
And yet you keep insisting on peeing.
Yeah.
And like the people who are like, oh, we got to do quality of life stuff in San Francisco because people poop everywhere. And the thing that we can't do to resolve that is give them toilets. We can do anything except put toilets in San Francisco to stop people from pooping everywhere. I promise you it's not going to work. Right? Yeah. There's no amount of telling people they're not allowed to poop that will stop people from pooping. Yeah. I read that important textbook as a child, Everybody Poops. And I've absorbed its message.
You're reminding me of the sort of administrator brain that happens when you decide that when somebody comes to you with the complaint that, for example, there's too many snack wrappers accumulating in the computer lab, and the solution is not to put trash cans into the computer lab because people aren't supposed to be eating in the computer lab because there are computers in there. So the solution is to put a sign on the computer lab saying no food and drink allowed in the computer lab.
Well, and it's the same thing that says, well, okay, people who have a house find it easier to get off drugs, but they shouldn't be taking drugs, so they can't have a house until they're clean and sober.
Oh, God. Yeah, that's sort of sanctimonious crap.
Well, it's the same thing all around. It's the difference between harm reduction and, honestly, a kind of consequentialism and utilitarianism, which these guys say they embrace.
Right.
Right? I mean, I'll call it idealism. It's not idealism in the sense of hewing to any ideal that I like, but it hews to an ideal that says that, you should all do what I tell you. And if you're not smart enough to do that.
And maybe this is a good place to close things out, because this is something that I guess I mentioned it toward the end of my book, but I think that in a way, these guys are too idealistic in the sense that they are married to an idea about how the world is, regardless of all evidence to the contrary, right? Peter Thiel thinks that he's not going to die, or that he doesn't have to die.
Unless Greta Thunberg kills him.
Right, exactly. Oh, God. But yeah, I mean, and yet they see themselves as the hard-nosed, practical men out in the world.
Yeah, it's true. Like, that is the posture, right?
Yeah.
It's facts don't care about your feelings.
Right, exactly.
Right? I'm an empiricist. You're squishy. You can't admit that you are just a bag of predictable outputs in response to inputs. I am B.F. Skinner. You are in my box. And back to sort of billionairism as being closely related to solipsism, I think broadly, Pax seeing like a state, anything that requires you to deal with people as populations rather than as individuals induces you to stop thinking about people as real and start thinking about them as statistical phenomena and not as things that have qualitative internal experience.
I agree, and that's a downer, and we have to find a way to bring these people back onto a level where we can deal with them.
The best politicians, the ones that I have lots of respect for, don't seem to lose sight of that. Mamdani, I know he's only been in office for a little while, but Mamdani seems very centered on the individual experiences of his constituents.
Yeah.
In a way that is very different from, say, how Rob Ford, who was the mayor of Toronto, was infamous for, like, he was the guy, if you called, so he had a talk radio show where he and his brothers, now the premier of Ontario, would do, right-wing talk radio. But you could ring in and you could say, I have a pothole, and he would show up and fill it, right? Which is like, that's another way of thinking about other people as real, but it's very different from saying like, I want to do policies that make people better off. Because I listen to them all. I listen to where the potholes are coming from and what's stopping the potholes from coming to existence. And I listen to the pothole filling workers and what stops them from filling the potholes. And I asked experts how to improve pothole filling, and he's filled 100,000 potholes during his tenure, right, Mamdani? And that's more than Rob Ford ever managed. So there is some way to view people as real without becoming one of these pathological weirdos like Rob Ford. Yeah, it probably involves also not smoking crack. But
or doing too much ketamine.
Yeah, we're doing too much ketamine. Just enough ketamine.
Yes, exactly. Don't do too much drugs and stay in school, kids. That's the message of this podcast.
Right.
Good. Okay, well, Cory, it has been a delight having you on the show, and let's talk more soon.
All right. Nice chatting.
Thanks again to this week's guest, Cory Doctorow. Next week, we have Katie Mack, and we're going to be talking about quite a bit farther in the future than we usually do on here. We'll be discussing the end of the universe. To submit questions for future guests and to suggest other guests, and to see more pictures of Babka, join the conversation on Patreon. You can also find us on YouTube, on Instagram at DATMpod, on the web and on Blue Sky at dreamingagainstthemachine.com, or just find us wherever you get your podcasts. Dreaming Against the Machine is a proud member of Multitude Productions. Our executive producer is Nick Carissimi. Our associate producer is Rosie Thomas. Our theme music is by Jared Emerson Johnson. Our show logo is by Nick James. And our fearless leader is Babka, the greatest cat in the observable universe. I'm Adam Becker, and I'll see you next week.